Well, g'day guys and welcome to the podcast. I'm Mitch Docker, your host. This is Life in the Peloton, of course, presented to you by MAAP, our major partner. And look, you may remember back in March, I embarked on the equinox, a brief moment of balance where we all experienced 12 hours of light and darkness in both hemispheres. And as daylight extends for some and less for others, with MAAP, we embrace this global connection. And what you can do is you can roll with us for 12 hours from daybreak to sundown over a week long of series of rides coming up this equinox. It's happening again this September. Yep. Keep your eyes peeled for more information. It's coming up. It's a lot of fun. Look, it is a real challenge riding for 12 hours over that sunlight. But at the end of the day, it was a really cool experience. Well, guys, I've got a bit of different direction for you this week. Josh Poertner. Now, some of you out there would know this name because he is an absolute legend when it comes to the technical industry. He's 24 years in the industry. He was working for 15 years over at Zipp as a technical director, and he did a whole bunch of things there. At this time, though, he is the CEO of Silca. We're going to get into that story more in the podcast. But he is also the marginal gains guy. He's got his own podcast about it. That is what he is. He is the go-to for professional teams and individuals who want to know what is the best out there when it comes to the bike technology and in terms of aerodynamics, speed, and optimal performance. He was a guy working back at CSC in the day when Fabian Cancellara won Roubaix. He waxed his chain when it came to him winning the Olympic time trial, right through to setting up Alex Dowsett to attempting the hour record, and so much more. I've only tapped on a few things that I know off the top of my head. He is involved in everything. And he was working with EF Education First when I was riding there, and I met him back in 2019 when he was asked to come on board to help develop the tubeless tyre revolution into the road racing scene. Yet, Andreas Clear brought him across at Roubaix to get on the front of it. We were one of the first teams to use tubeless tyres in Roubaix and in the rest of road racing. Look, it's something that we now expect as the norm. He's a really, really cool guy. It's a bit of a different direction, like I said, in Life in the Peloton. It's a bit of a technical episode, but Josh is such an awesome guy. If you've heard his podcast, he's so easy to listen to. He breaks it down so we can understand. There's so much to unpack in this, and I guarantee everyone is going to take something away from this podcast. Look, just before we get there, it is gravel season starting up over here in Australia and also in the Northern Hemisphere as well. It's changing. The seasons are changing. We're coming out of winter. We're coming into autumn over there as well. And gravel is kicking off. But of course, over here in Lancefield, we have got the Specialized Dirty Docker is upon us. The 12th, 13th of October. And it's going to be such a fun thing. This is it. This has been a big project for me over the last couple of years. Something I've wanted to do, put in my hometown, get into the gravel scene, and I've created the Specialized Dirty Docker. Saturday is all about getting out there. It's a cyclocross event called Cross Vegas, plus a cross-country running event called the Lanny Cross Country Run. So there's a bit of everything, but Sunday is a premier event. The Cobbles gravel event. There's distances for everyone. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, make sure you get your entries in and make sure you stay over on Saturday night because that's what it's all about. It's a festival. We're going to be camping. There's live music, fire pits. We're even going to be rolling in outdoor saunas. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're going to have to come and check that out. That's going to be all held in, of course, Land Vegas, the infamous Lancefield. Well, guys, sit back and enjoy this one. This is a fantastic episode. I bring you Josh Poertner. Well, Josh Poertner, mate. Well, welcome to the podcast. This is a bit of a different spin for Life in the Peloton. Well, it's not saying that we haven't done a technical one over the years, but it's been a little while, and we've never had someone of your expertise on the podcast. It's a very special welcome to Josh. How are you, mate?
Oh, I'm good, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, look, you're very accustomed to a podcast. You've got your own podcast, Marginal Gains, but YouTube channel, but also you featured on a lot of podcasts because you're such an interesting guy. You've been in the industry for over 20 years. We're going to focus on a lot of things in this podcast, what you're doing right now, your experience in teams, but I want to rewind back to a period that really does interest me, and it's got to do with Zipp. You were over at Zipp Wheels for 15 years as a bit of a technical director over there. But the thing that interests me the most, and I'm always going to bring it back to this, is Paris-Roubaix. Look, I love this. If I can weave Roubaix into every podcast, I try and do it. And for you revolutionised what happened at Roubaix. And I always remember back, I didn't exactly know when it was, but these wheels started to appear. And it was around sort of, I guess, 2003 through to 2006, this revolutionised sort of where we saw carbon wheels starting to come onto the cobblestones. You were the man behind this. Can you just run me through? It's a bit of an open question, but I know we've spoken about this before. Tell me a little bit about this time back in Zipp and this period where we started to see, Roubaix getting faster.
Oh man, yeah. I mean I was obsessed with Roubaix for God so many years, and still in some ways am. Right, right. It's one of those like no matter how many times you've been, you've seen it. No matter what you know about it, you always just come back for more, right? But yeah, I got to Zipp '99, and it had just been bought by a guy named Andy Ording, and it was really a triathlon brand. And I had raced in Europe for a couple seasons, and went to engineering school, and really thought I was done with bikes. I ended up here in Indianapolis with race cars, and then met Andy right after he bought the Zipp brand and was like, oh, this is cool. Like this guy's doing he's just an amazing, he's actually my business partner at Silca today. So we've worked together now for 25 years. But started with the company and with this idea of like, okay, we need to take this tech to road because nobody was riding carbon wheels in road, really at all. And, you'd get
because at that point, Zipp was mainly in triathlon, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty much a triathlon brand. We had the odd like Jackie Duran, like, he would nick the TT wheels off the bus at Lotto and like cobble together. Like he literally had a front 404 in like '99 that he had cut out and relaced onto a 36 hole Dura-Ace hub like every other hole so he could ride it as a rear. And all of a sudden, he like they were time trialing on the wheels, but they weren't road racing on them. And all of a sudden we're like, Jackie's in another like suicide breakaway on a 404. Like what's happening? But there were very, you'd have, if you remember like, Jan Ulrich, like, riding lightweights up the mountain, but not down. And, there just weren't a lot of carbon wheels. And my dream was like, carbon wheels, every rider, every day would just change the sport because of the advantage.
Just there, why was that? Why were guys so scared? And we'll get to Roubaix. Why was so scared to do those things, to go downhill? Was this idea that carbon wasn't as strong, that it was just going to fall apart? Why weren't we road racing it? Why weren't we going down hills? Why weren't we using it all the time? Because clearly these top level guys understood that there was a gain there.
Well, I think they didn't. I think that was a huge, like the gain from every athlete you spoke to of that era, the only gain was weight.
Yeah, right.
And then the negatives were, braking with carbon rims. They were so light that sometimes the imbalance of the wheel, this is one of the lightweight problems and what really freaked Ulrich out. The valve stems were still brass, right? And the valve extenders were still brass. And so you get like 12, 15 grams of imbalance on a ultra lightweight wheel, like a lightweight, and all of a sudden at 60 miles an hour, it feels like a speed wobble. It's not, but it feels like it, right? And so, so the riders were thinking, well, it only helps with weight and nothing else. So why are we going to ride them? And nobody believed Aero. I think I spent 2000 through 2003 meeting with team managers, DSs, really trying to drive this home and got nowhere. And then the gift to us really was the SRM, the adoption of the SRM. And all of a sudden we had this sort of the lingua franca, right, of the watt, right? All of a sudden everybody knew what a watt was. And that just hadn't been true 3, 4, 5 years earlier. And so, yeah, it was '03. We took some wheels to Lucca, Italy, where Bjarne Riis had a compound, and they would do a training camp there for CSC. And we put the riders on the different wheels and we had them do little like loops. And you could just see it in the data. It was clear as day. And I think Bjarne was the kind of team manager who could tell the riders, no, you're going to ride the wheel, and they would do it. And that was it. And so, 2004, we get CSC on the wheels, and all of a sudden, within a couple of years, like all the teams have carbon wheels except at Roubaix. And so for me, it was this thing of like, okay, we're pretty largely responsible for this carbon wheel thing generally. But man, the first company that can win Roubaix, like that's huge. And so I spent years and failed. I mean, failed miserably for years. I mean, I would go, we had a couple of tests where we had planned to be like in the Arnberg forest for, 2-3 days. And literally we'd take like 30 wheels over and break all of them in like 2 hours. And then you're just kind of standing there by the van, like, ooh, lunch, dinner, what next? And so we weren't helping ourselves because the riders, it just kept reinforcing for the riders, like it won't work. And then we finally really hit on this kind of combination of things. We developed this really wide rim, which is a thing now, but wasn't a thing then. We really put the time and the energy into proving that the wider tires weren't slower, which everybody thought. I mean, I think the lowest period there was, I think it was 07 or 08. Magnus Backstedt, we'd done a ton of work with him, because he had won it previously, and then he was at Slipstream, and we were at Slipstream, and so like, oh, Magnus, if you can, like, these wheels with the 27 will survive the Arnberg. And we tested, it worked. And then this combination of, he shows up that year and can't remember, I think at the time he told me he was 1 stone overweight, me, like the engineer, I'm like, what the hell is a stone? Thank God we had Google. Stone's like 14 pounds, and like, oh, that's kind of a lot. But so he shows up a little overweight, a little undertrained, and kind of lost it the night before. And I'm not going to say chicken out, but went for the 24s instead of the 27s, hits the Arnberg
on the same wheels,
on the same wheel, double fails both wheels. And, Velo News here in the States, they used to have a thumbs up, thumbs down thing in the front of the magazine. And I got my first thumbs down. It was Josh and Zipp. This will never work. Please stop ruining athletes' days or whatever. It was heartbreaking. And Magnus, who is just he's such a lovely guy, right? He actually called me and said, "Oh, mate, I'm so sorry. This isn't your fault. It was just bad day. I'm a little overweight. I shouldn't have gone with the 24. Like, keep going. Like, there's future here." And so we kept going. Yeah.
Well, just on that note, and I'll let you keep going for a minute, but I just want to interlude here is that what is it there? Because, in those times, we're hearing 27 now, and everyone be like, well, that's super narrow. Like, why wouldn't you just take the risk? But we've got to try and get inside the mindset here. And this is something that you sort of alluded to there, that when you're breaking these wheels, you need someone like a Bjarne Riis. You need someone to actually back you up and go, hey, guys, because, look, as pros, and I'm 100% in on this, I'm now where I'm not at the finer pointy end getting dropped or, needing that one bit more just to hang on to the bunch. It doesn't matter if I go, 1K faster or 1K slower now, what I do, as long as I feel good. So I'm open to trying different stuff these days. When I was racing, I wasn't open as much, and I needed that proof. I needed to see someone win on it. I needed to see even the hard data wasn't enough. I needed to feel good on the bike to convince myself. So this is a really hard thing. So to rewind back to Magnus, that night before, I guess he's just freaked out about the rolling resistance of a bigger tyre and feeling like, well, this is going to be slower. I don't care if it survives Arenberg faster. I want to be faster the whole day. Is that sort of the mentality he was getting in and why he chickened out?
Yeah, I think, this for me was the beginning of my obsession with, and if you listen to my podcast, you hear it all the time. We talk about mental models, right? We simplify the world into these mental models of how things work. And, like if you're not an engineer, technician, I mean, heck, even me early in my career as an engineer, like my mental models were broken, right? Because they were historic, and they were, we would say now like old wives' tales. But those mental models get handed down. And so, that was a thing where nobody really believed that aero worked But at the same time, almost everybody would tell you that a 27 was slower than a 24 because of aero. And they would do it in the same breath that they say, well, but I don't really believe in aero, or they would say, oh, the 27 is going to have way more rolling resistance, right? And again, it's just a broken mental model. But I mean, that, it's the stuff that we fought with the tire pressure forever. Oh, lower is slower. Well, how do we know lower is slower? Oh, well, everybody just knows it, right? I mean, there's this model of, it's all casing deflection and rolling resistance, and, higher is better, lower is slower, end of story. And it takes time and data. And then to your point, really, I mean, it takes people following the data to start winning. And that's when the stuff really changes, So I mean, to end the Roubaix story, like, we finally get everything together. We get all this tire pressure. We figured out that tire pressure is one of the biggest, most important parts of this whole thing. We get Fabian on the 28s, on the 303 that we designed, the whole thing. He wins Roubaix. And I swear to God, the next year at Roubaix, every single team, I mean, even like the little French and Italian teams, they're all on carbon wheels, and they're all like, oh, yes, but of course, like the carbon wheels, they work here now. And it was like, oh my God, it took, Andy Ording at Zipp, always had this joke that, hey, 20 years later, you're an overnight success. And that's literally what happened. We beat that drum for 10 years, and then finally it was like, oh yeah, but of course that's how it works. And I think the next 5 years were all won on rims that we designed or made using the technology, the tire, all of the stuff that we had done there. And as soon as I left Zipp, I mean, that was to start Silca, or really to pick up the Silca brand and restart it. I mean, my inbox for probably 3 years was just people like, help us with Roubaix, and leading to a lot of the work that we do with teams now. So in the end, it was a good thing.
Before that, and I think, in a similar sort of vein, there was this period, I didn't actually know about this, only doing a little bit of research about you, was this, I guess, missed opportunity, you'd almost call it. And another rider that I really loved is Jan Ullrich. And to rewind, apparently, and I'll let you tell the story, back in 99, reached out to you to chat about another sort of thing that was coming into the Peloton. What wasn't in the Peloton yet is ceramic bearings. And this is, to again, looking for those marginal gains. Always, the Peloton's always sort of searching for the marginal gains here. Tell me a little bit about this story here. I found this so fascinating. I did not know about this story until sort of just recently, and reading about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, you go right back here, and I did not know that was going on back then.
Yeah, so he reached out, gosh, late 99, maybe early 2000, about the Olympics, and kind of typical his coach trainer person. Jan really wants to target the Olympics. Can you build him some special super light wheels? And we had just kind of redeveloped the 303 at that time, before it was called the 340, and it was heavy, and we really refashioned it as a very light. If you remember, the rim at the time that people loved was the Mavic GL 330, 330 gram aluminum box section rim. And so my vision as a former road racer wannabe myself was like, if we could make an aero, like a 40 millimeter rim that weighed the same as a GL 330, like we're gonna do something here. And so we'd been really driving towards that, and we actually ended up doing it. That those early rims were like 285, so I mean, super light, a little fragile, but for pros who tend to be a little lighter than the rest of us, worked great. And so we'd been working on this rim tech, and they said, well, can you build the wheels? We've got Thun making this special hub. And, Thun is one of these like mythical brands of Germany. They're in the Black Forest, and all this craftsmanship, and Uli at Thun, he's been a friend of mine for 20 plus years, and just super, super good guy. But the challenge with the Thun hub was that it's two like forged flanges, like they kind of floated on a center tube. Which was how they got the weight so low. And then the bearings were all press fit together. And so we get this hub, and it's just notchy, and I'm like, man, this does not feel, this is not what fast feels like,
It's light, but yeah, the whole wheel's light, but it doesn't roll fast.
It didn't roll, and I don't want to ride this wheel with these bearings in it. And so I was just, a year out of school, and one of my engineering friends from school had gone on to work for Timken Bearing, which he had told me was making some sort of bearing for like some fuel pump assembly in the space shuttle. And so he had, been like, dude, there's these ceramic balls in it, like, 30,000 RPM. The inertia is so high that the steel balls like go like wonky and the ceramics can, and, I'm just fascinated by this. Or first I'd ever heard of ceramic bearings. And so I ring him and said, hey, we have a chance we're building this Olympic wheel set for a guy who could very feasibly win it. What can we do with the bearings? And he said, oh yeah, the micro miniature bearing we do is the company in Switzerland called WIB, WIB, and they use they assemble the bearings with the best subcomponents and whatever. And so we did it. And, first, to my knowledge, cycling wheel set with ceramic bearings, and he wins the Olympics, and we were pretty excited. And so the next year we did a wheel, we call it the Z3, and we made it expensive. And these ceramic bearings are a fortune. And so people would say, why is it so expensive? Like, well, these bearings are crazy. And so kind of to drive the point home, we had this like spare parts list in the Zipp catalog, and it was, brake pads, quick release, right? All these like $10 to $20 items. And I'm like, I want you to put ceramic bearing upgrade right in the middle of that at $1,200. So it just
People
jumps
can
off
understand.
the page as like,
Yeah.
like this is why that wheel set is expensive. And we did it. And, we sold a few hundred sets, and we had some people who were real fans of it. And then, but yeah, that was kind of all I don't know. I didn't think all that much more of it. And then, yeah, like 2 years later at the Tour de France, met Jakob at Ceramic Speed and kind of looked around and was like, oh shit, he's built an entire business around this idea. Like, oh man, we totally missed this boat. I just thought nobody would ever spend that money on that thing. And wow, was I wrong? So yeah, I'd call that like my biggest, probably my biggest business error in my career.
Well, to help us understand when it comes to bike riding, and obviously we're not going as fast as sort of a pump that's in a rocket going to the moon. Why is ceramic bearings much better when it comes to a wheel hub? Just for the gomads out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're honest, they're not much better. They're a little bit better. They're really the definition of marginal gains. That $1,200 bearing upgrade. I mean, when we did all the testing and really refined it, I think it was like 0.8 watts faster than the bearings we were replacing. So I think, that's maybe the thing that's been lost in kind of the future of that business is, it really is a lot of money for not a huge amount of savings. You think of all the things out there that are 0.8 watts, right? It's like one wrinkle in a skin suit is at least 0.8 watts. Badly pinned number is probably 1.5. The Aero socks for $30 can save you 15. Right. So,
Yeah.
So I think if we're putting it in sort of the pantheon of like, cost benefit, it's not that I thought it couldn't work. I just never imagined that it could work as a standalone business. And again, holy smokes, I was completely wrong. I mean, they've Ceramic Speed and who are great friends of mine. I love them, but they've built an empire on this thing. And there's probably 6 other companies that are very successful, very large ceramic bearing upgrade providers of all sorts. And, the thing, the idea is that they're more round, right? You think of the harder the material, the more round you can make it and the better you can polish it. And so like the top, like the 1/1,000,000th inch ceramic bearings, they're magnetically floated and polished while floating in this like ultra strong magnet. It's called magnetic float polishing. Super cool technology. And you can just make it so they're rounder and then they're harder. And so it's kind of back to like, a lot of air pressure in your tire. If you can get really beautiful, high polished races, and these really hard, really round balls, you can save a few tenths of a watt. Now the other thing that I think a lot of people don't think about with them, and this is where I think I see people getting a little bit caught up or caught out with the technology is like when you see the video, you flick it with the finger and it spins forever. Well, that's because there's non-contact seals and there's no grease in them. And to last, you need grease. And then really you need seals. And so I think that's the thing. If you look at like a lot of the popular, like oversized pulley wheel upgrades and things, they really do save you that 1.5, 1.8 watts, that they claim. And that's legit. But they really also need to be maintained, like probably pop the shields off and like wash them, flush them out and re-lubricate them every 300 to 500K. And who's doing that? So I think that's the balance there. And, and again, the things that made me think, I don't think anybody's going to do this.
I want to come now to sort of where we crossed over in paths, and I think it was around 2019. And actually, I'd completely forgotten about this because I was in another world, and I'd completely forgotten about my bike. I flew in to Roubaix 2019. I arrive at the hotel, and the team's gone to me, righto, Mitch, well, let me set this up for my own defense here.
Okay, I love this story.
99% of the time, you travel without a bike as a pro because the team takes your bike in the truck and they arrive at the race, and then you have your training bike at home and you just fly without a bike, and you get there and your race bike's there, primed, ready to go. This occasion, I came from another race. I can't remember where I was, but I had to come with my race bike. And so it was abnormal for me flying with a race bike. So I got off the plane, jumped in the car, and I went to the airport. And the team, like I said, to pick up where I was, righto, Mitch, where's that race bike? Let's unpack it. And I'm like, oh, the race bike. Right. Yeah. I guess that's still going around the carousel back at Brussels. And I guess this is where you pick up. And what was your job there? Not speaking necessarily about marginal gains here. We're talking about just gains here, aren't we?
Yeah. No, that was, yeah. So I, one of the things I've done for years and I really enjoy doing is, I think the progressive directors like Andreas at EF, will, have pull me or pull us in for tire pressure testing or sometimes just equipment validation, things like that. And so the team that year had a ton of stuff going on. I mean, you had these new prototype Vittoria tires, had these new inserts that nobody had tried before. We were really trying to figure out, do the inserts change the pressure? Just all these unknowns. And so he'd called me and I'd flown in for that. And I was with the mechanics and the guys when you showed up, and I don't think we'd ever met before that. And I'm standing there just feeling like, it's like that thing where you just feel so like awkward for other people. I'm like, oh God, this poor guy, because I know like, your job isn't tending to a bike and remember to be like, like one of the things that it took me a while to really learn about the athletes, right, is like, they're in their own world, right? You're the center of your own world, and you're juggling and tending to all these things that are in your brain. And it just really makes it hard to focus on the other stuff, And so, like early in my career, I would kind of preach like, look, guys, here's the data, just do what the data, and like, oh, they're not listening because they don't. And so it's really changed my approach to, how we try to get athletes on board with new technology. And one of the big challenges is, especially when you're at a race, like you're not thinking about the technology. Like, you didn't forget your bike because you were thinking like, should I have been at 4.7 bar or 4.8? I'm really twisted up a bit. Like, that's not what you don't care. And so, yeah, so I was working with JJ, who's love him to death, a great mechanic. And I'm like, oh, like JJ, I'll go with you. Let's just go get his bike. And the whole way there, we're joking about like, all right, if they pulled it off, or is it just spinning around on the carousel? And of course, they pulled it off. And then the funniest thing is we get there and, it's in your name and they're like, you're not Mitch Docker. And we're like, yeah, but look, we have all the clothes. Like, look, we're wearing all the clothing of the team.
Give us that like €25,000 bike
exactly.
now.
It was like one of those really the next awkward moment. And thank goodness they let us have it and brought it back. But no, I love moments like that, right? Because it humanizes the whole thing, and it really, yeah.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because that's a big factor of what you do. And I want to have a chat about Silca in a minute, but part of your business is, and you can tell me a little bit about this, is actually consulting to teams, and you alluded to that a little bit. Is that often teams they're working with a lot of different companies. A lot of them at the very pointy end, some of them not. they're all trying to produce and also tell the story that they've got the next best thing or they've got the best, equipment to offer. And they need that to be presented on the world stage to ultimately trickle down and sell and blah, blah, blah. But I guess as a team, you can't necessarily question them if you don't know if that's true or not. They might have the resources behind them as the sponsor to test it, but as a team, you don't have those resources. You don't have the money to go out and do individual testing. So I guess, is that sort of where you come in and teams reach out and go, look, we're not trying to question our sponsors. We just want to know, are we running with the best stuff in certain times? Or when do they reach out? When is these times that you have to come on board? When you're not, when you're not working with a specific company like, say, Zipp and coming in because Zipp sponsored CSC. So now it's just taken to a new level.
Yeah, I think the directors who really get it understand that they can't risk losing the athlete's confidence in the product. And so I would say it's when that starts to be in doubt, people will call us. Sometimes they call us with, like so-and-so wants to do an hour record and we want to put the best package together, start from zero, right? Like whatever that looks like. And that's one thing, but it's not common, but it happens. But yeah, the best example I use that's not our sport, so I can talk a little bit more freely because I wasn't involved. But if you remember a few years back, Under Armour got the contract for the USA speed skating suits. And they developed this, super exotic suit. It's, whatever, $10,000 a suit. And of course, and the athletes go out and they're not putting up good times. And very quickly, within like one or two average performances, the athletes are like, it's the suit. The suit sucks. Oh, the suit is terrible. And Under Armour just completely lost the faith of the team. And in subsequent data and testing, the suit actually was pretty fast. It almost certainly wasn't the suit, but that kind of breakdown in the trust of the equipment really led the whole team to, in a sense, like self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like we don't think we can perform at these, hit these numbers that we're planning to hit. And so you don't. And, that stuff happens in cycling as well. And so, we've absolutely had, last Olympic cycle, not this one, we had one of the federations reach out and say, the riders don't like the bike that the sponsor gave us. They don't trust it. And, will you test it? And so we went and did the testing of the bike and actually found out that it was slightly faster than the sponsor had even told them that it was. And, I think it was a matter of, I won't tell you who it was, but it was not the British. So I think this team showed up and they saw the new, if you like, that was the very beginning of the British bikes with the super wide, fork legs and stays.
Yeah.
And they're looking at their bike that looked pretty normal,
traditional,
pretty traditional. Yeah. And they're like, this bike stinks. And they started to lose confidence. And so we can come in, we can do some wind tunnel, we can do track testing, we can put all the data together. And then when you go back to them and go, no, like this bike is, I don't have their bike to test it against, but this bike,
but it is fast.
It's faster than the bike you had last time. And, and you can really start to build that confidence back. So yeah, I would say, it's really a mix of that. And guys like, Andreas at EF or, Dan Bigham at Ineos, they really get this. And I think they really understand that as much as it's about technology and, the guys like me want to make it all about the technology. If the riders don't believe in it or they don't want to be riding it or they think there's some problem with it, then none of these marginal, everything is so good right now that even the bigger marginal gains are easily offset by a loss of confidence in the rider.
A psychological effect. Yeah, like I can only think back to, I don't know whether you were involved with this at all at EF, but when the System 6 was brought in from Cannondale and it was as a slightly heavier bike, I want to say, high eights, even maybe 9 kilo, fully set up. And we were trying to strip it down, looking at different things, lighter bottle cages, different bars. I know Simon Clark even rode without bar tape in one race to save a bit and one bottle cage and all this sort of stuff because, from what we're understanding from Cannondale, this bike was very fast at a point, when it got to 15 kilometers an hour or above, this was the fastest bike you could possibly ride. The problem was we tested it in a Giro and the first race we did was in a hard mountain race and, mountainous race that all of us got dropped, whether it was because of the bike or whether it was not all of us, but a lot of us got dropped, the sprinters using it. And we just pretty much wrote it off, exactly what you said. And it was like this fulfilling prophecy where everyone just went, it's the bike. I'm suffering on this bike. And the only way that I was eventually convinced was I had all the data in front of me and I had all these guys preaching at me, but I felt it in the race. I wasn't sold. It was until I had the bike at home and I was training on it. And I did the same loop in Girona that I've always done, whatever it was, a 3-hour loop. And you knew door to door when you did your efforts, whatever, it was 3 hours and 1 minute. It was 2:59, somewhere within that vicinity. All of a sudden, I was getting home 15 minutes faster from the first one. I'm like, oh, that's strange. Must have had a good day. Next week, same again, 20 minutes faster. I'm like, then guys kept going to me, mate, stop half-wheeling me. Stop, you're really annoying to train with. How come you're going so fast? I'm like, something's going on here. And suddenly I was convinced. It was on my own terms that I got convinced. So I guess the question out of all this is that for me as a pro, and then once, we talked about riders winning on it, but before we get to that phase, you have to have a buy-in from the pros. Mm. What is your sort of tactic, I guess, or the way that you do it, whether is it convincing the sports directors and then hand it over, hey, that's your job, you sell it? Or are you part of that selling process to the riders?
We can be both. I mean, ideally, we would come in early enough that we have time to allow that to happen. So I mean, go back to the 303s at Roubaix. We for 09, once we knew we had a wheel that wouldn't break and the tire size needed to be 28, we started that season with a wind tunnel test, and we took Fabian and Nicky and all those guys to the wind tunnel, and we put them on the what was the steel Cervelo was replaced R25. So there was a steel Cervelo, the Prodigy, then the R25. And we put them on that with the classic wheels, and then we put them on the bike with the Aero wheels, and they could see their data, right? And then, so you're kind of building, again, the mental model. And then we followed that up with a test, at Roubaix, in the Arnberg. Then we did the Carrefour, right? I mean, you do the thing. And the thing I kept really trying to plant in their mind from that wind tunnel test was, it was probably the other clever thing we did. That was the year Tom Bonin was on Eddie Merckx bikes when they were not the best designed carbon bikes out there. We'll just say that. They were one of the transitions of the Eddie Merckx brand. And this thing had like a 68 millimeter wide flat down tube. I mean, it was just aerodynamically, it was just like everything you could do wrong. They're like, let's do that. And we knew he'd be riding 32 spoke box section wheels. And so we had bought one of these bikes and we put those wheels on it, and we put Fabian in the tunnel on that bike next to the bike he'd just been on. And the delta was as big as Fabian's delta from his road bike to his TT bike. And so the whole time we just kept saying, dude, you're essentially, compared to Bonin, you're on a time trial bike. I mean, I think the numbers when we did all this stuff, I think the Aero was 40 watts with the tire pressure stuff. It all rolled up to be 70 watts. And we just kept saying, he's on
70.
70. Yeah, it was crazy. And we just kept saying, Bonin is on a bike that is slower than the Eddie Merckx era bikes, right? And you're on the equivalent of a time trial bike. So, and you just build that in, right? And then you run them through, and, we did stupid stuff. He was worried, well, if we go test in the Arenberg, it's not like the race. In the race, we hit, 55K an hour. And so, we brought in a scooter, right? We motor paced him into the Arenberg at 55K an hour and didn't break the wheels. And so, it's a real building process. And even then, we really lucked out that he almost chickened out that morning. And he, as I heard the story from him, Tor Hushovd, a test team rode by and was on the 303s that year. And he went, oh shit. It kind of all clicked. I think it's one thing to not have an advantage if you think there's no disadvantage. Right. So I think, if he's thinking, and we see this with the track guys all the time, there's a lot of track stuff that's it's changing now, but the guys would say like, well, I want to run the wheel that everyone else is running because, I may not have an advantage, but I know I'm not at a disadvantage. But the
The
second
risk, they don't want to take a massive risk.
there's a risk, and we're humans, right? There's a real asymmetry with risk, right? You'd way rather, or it hurts far more to lose $5 than it feels good to win $5, right? I mean, we know that, and it's human psychology.
Yeah, you think just to the Olympics now, the 4 years, say, the 4 years I've put to this, all the sacrifice, the effort and the training, and suddenly it might be just the technology that lets me down. I have this doubt in it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so, it really drives this risk aversion. And thank goodness for us, because he said, I almost didn't do it. And then Tour rolled by and for him, it clicked of like, oh, I'm at a disadvantage. What if it works? What if he can beat me because he's got them and I don't? And it changes everything. And so I think certainly for me, it's through my career has been a real process of kind of merging the technology with the psychology, around this and really realizing that, oh gosh, and like I said, I think a lot of what we're working on now are relatively marginal gains. I mean, you think back to the CSC era, having an aero bike and aero wheels compared to non-aero bikes and box section wheels was massive. I mean, it was
70 watts. Like we're talking huge, that's, we're not talking a half a watt.
Yeah. And now a lot of the stuff we're working on is a watt here and a watt there, or a couple there. And it again, if you just have to find that tipping point of a couple riders with success. I mean, aero socks were one of those things that, and as much as I hate to say it, I'm no massive fan of tall aero socks visually, but they work. And once people are winning with them, you got to do it. Right. And the turned in brake levers, like I think it looks terrible, but it works. And we're there now with narrow bars. We've been talking about that for a couple of years on our channel. That, guys, I hate to say it, but narrow bars are so much faster that you can't not be riding them and doing what you want to be doing. And you look at the Peloton today and everybody's on the narrow bars. And so again, it's that 20 years later, you're an overnight success, right? It's some of these things are years in the making. And then it just takes one Pogacar riding 165 cranks. And all of a sudden everybody's like, of course, 165. Yeah, totally. That works, and for the last 25 or more years, people have been like, that's crazy. That'll never work. So there's a million things like that.
Another really exciting thing that's going on with you, which has been happening since you took over the company in about 2013, I think it was, Silca. And Silca, look, it's a brand that we've known. I think it's been in the bike industry since early 1917. 1917. Yeah, I was going to say 1907. It's been around for ages, and it's been in the family, one of the oldest companies owned by the one family. And eventually, it came to a point where it sort of disappeared for a while and was just sort of hovering along there. But it's been reborn, and it's been reborn with you. And one of the amazing things that's going on now, I want to talk about firstly the takeover of that business and why you thought, I think it essentially was taking over the name and continuing on what they'd started way back then. But is what's happened with what you've done with lube and wax, and that is something that I think you were talking about their marginal gains, but this is something that I think is overlooked, where it's maybe bordering on more than a marginal gain. But let's talk about Silca first and that exciting sort of rebirth of a fantastic company.
Yeah, I mean that was really transformative for me. So SRAM bought Zipp in like 2008, and I kind of stayed on as what they called category manager, and then there's too many spreadsheets and businessy stuff, and so I went back into like technical management and, was having a good time there. But, I used to joke it, making carbon wheels, it was like, we're just making the same dinner over and over again. Right. Right. You make a little bit deeper one or a little bit whatever, but, I was looking for something else, and I really enjoyed, some of the teams I was on around SRAM product and, some of the, carbon composite things I did there, but it was just looking for something different. And Claudio Sacchi, the then owner of Silca, he was the grandson of the founder, and I'd known him for 20 years from the Zipp experience because we'd always bought the little disc wheel valve adapters, the crack pipes as we call them, from him. And and so he sent me an email and just said, hey, I have pancreatic cancer. They give me 6 months. I've been trying to sell the company for a year and nobody wants to buy it. Do you know anybody? And thought, like, oh God, how sad, and I mean, my first pump when I was 15 was a Silca. I love the brand. I've always been friends with Claudio, just such a lovely guy. And I remember kind of going to bed that night thinking like, wow, who would be dumb enough to buy a bankrupt Italian company that makes pumps, right? When we've got all these fancy, shiny silver pumps coming out of China, half the price and the whole thing. And then, as the next couple of weeks went on, it was like these data points of like, gosh, last time we went to the tunnel, we actually lost 2 hours of tunnel time because we'd broken both of our fancy, shiny silver Chinese.
Wow.
Like, why doesn't anybody make a valve extender that just, works? And like, and it kind of hit me like the bar on some of this stuff is pretty low, like the disc wheel adapter that Silca made. I mean, I had 10 ideas on how to make it better. Like, but I mean, when I was at Zipp, it's like, am I going to burn engineering hours on a valve adapter or on making the next wheel? Well, the next wheel. Like, probably 2 weeks went by and I bet I had 10 product ideas. And so I thought, hey, somebody needs to do it, needs to save this brand. And so, we were able to get, by the time I got there, all that was left was just the trademark. And so, the Italian government had sort of taken all the assets and they had all, disappeared, as I think happens in those situations, and were probably used to pay whatever debts, and the trademark was left. And so we were able to buy that. And 2014. So that was end of 2013. And then 2014, I started actually right at this desk I'm sitting at right now. I had a piece of paper with the trademark on it and a laptop, and that was the beginning of the company. And, started redesigning all the old pumps, but with new kind of engineering and materials. And then, like I said, people were coming out of the woodwork like, ooh, help us with this, help us with that. And I had done a lot of stuff with wax-based chain lubes back in the day with CSE. Actually, we would kind of homebrew these hot wax concoctions for the tour time trials and, Olympic time trial, things like that. And so, that's where like a lot of the ideas just start to come from. We did pumps and then we grew into tools, then we grew into bags.
But you wanted to keep it the traditional way that they'd already done it. You didn't want to necessarily reinvent the wheel. I guess sort of reinvent the wheel in a way. You wanted to make the traditional products, but tweak it and bring it up to speed, but keep that, like you said, they're metal. The pumps are metal. The quality's there.
Yeah, I mean, it was super exciting in the beginning for me, right? Because everything I'd ever made was somewhat exotic, carbon and ceramics and all this stuff. But really, all of that was designed to be obsoleted by the next year's product. And so, I think there was certainly a moment I had where it's like, wow, everything I've ever really worked on is probably in a landfill somewhere because I've made the thing that, surpassed it. And and with Silca, it was like, wow, what if I take their kind of heirloom quality, last forever? I mean, these Silca pumps, my God, people come to us with, I've got a 30, 40, 50-year-old pump, 60-year-old pump. And they're still rebuildable. People still use them. And I love that idea of like, wow, what if we took that ethos, kind of that mentality, and then we merged it with some of the modern engineering practices and, CAD design and machining and 3D printing and these other things. We could really have some fun, like, and we could make products that are built to last forever, but also do it with some of this tech. And, it's funny, I've done some like talks with, business school students and stuff. And like, well, how do you know anybody would ever buy this stuff? What's the market research? And like, the market research is me. Like, would I spend that pump is $500. Would I spend $500 on that pump? And, if you can look yourself in the mirror and say, yes, I would spend my own money on that. There's got to be more of us, right? Right? I'm not one of one. And so that was really where it started. Yeah.
I love what you said there, that the realization of, hang on, we're actually losing time here in whatever it is to do a wind tunnel test per hour. And we're wasting time on a pump that I thought was going to be good quality. I love that realization of, actually, if I just get a good pump, we can save money here. That was sort of crazy to me. I want to talk about wax, chain lube, in this whole umbrella, because this is something that we were chatting about a few months ago. And being a complete idiot, I was always, didn't really know much about it. Dry lube's sort of pretty good because it doesn't get all greasy on my chain and all this sort of stuff. Wax, who even uses wax? I didn't even know that we were using wax in the team. I just thought, we've got these cool chains that had this white stuff on it. I don't know what that does. It makes us go faster, You were really blowing my mind and helping me understand, when it comes to lubing a chain, whether we're just trying to beat the hour record, or whether we're just actually trying to preserve our chain and not have to buy a brand new chain every 6 months to a year because we're just training around, in the neighborhood here. Tell me a little bit about lube. I'll just put that out there, lubricant, wax, and help us understand what's going on there.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about this category and really high quality lubricant is it really is one of the rare spaces where there's no trade-offs, right? So you think of the traditional things we think of weight versus aero, you're kind of on a continuum and you're picking one or the other, more aeros, more surface area, but then there's going to be more weight. Tire pressure is the other one, right? The optimal tire pressure, is not only faster, but it handles better and it's less wearing on the tire and it corners faster. And what's the downside? There's none. You just have to pay attention. And lubricants are another one of those that you think of. The fastest lubricant is the thing that keeps the metal from ever touching other metal. Well, if the metal is never touching the other metal, it's also never wearing, right? And it also is going to be pretty quiet. And so, it's a category where you really can, have your cake and eat it too, in a sense that the right or the perfect lubricant will be the fastest lubricant that also is the lowest wearing, and the quietest. And, wax really is the closest thing we have to a perfect lubricant in a roller chain. And so, you think of the roller chain as actually a really complicated thing. Every chain has 116 links, give or take. Each of those links is 2 outer plates, 2 inner plates, a pin, a roller, right? And multiplied out. So, there's a lot of parts. And then it's under these incredible loads and pressures. So, at the pin to the bushing interface, under at a 250 watt load, you're seeing over 100,000 PSI at the surface of the pin. So,
what's loads. Happening in like a track standing start?
Oh yeah. The pressures just go crazy, right? And And so, you need a lubricant that can hold up to this. And I think it's really counterintuitive to people that a solid like wax can do this. But when you really get down into the science and the chemistry of it, it's kind of like ice skating. You think of how the ice is super hard and then the pressure of the skate blade makes it liquefy. And now you have this super efficient, you're actually gliding on liquid water, right? That's basically what's happening in a waxed chain, that you're under those extreme pressures. You're just locally liquefying the wax in that spot for that moment, and then it's hard again. And that allows you to withstand these crazy high pressures. But it also, because all of the negative space, the nooks and crannies are all full of this solid wax, the dirt isn't getting in. And so, what's really killing the chain more so than the loads and pressures is that you put dirt inside of that thing or allow it to be wicked in by an oil-based lube. And now you've created a grinding paste that's exposed to these extreme pressures and you're just grinding the metal apart. So yeah, it's a fascinating, super geeky thing. We work with a lab at Purdue University here in Indiana who super famous as a top 5 engineering school in the US and graduated more astronauts than anywhere else. And they actually have a sports engineering lab that studies chain friction and trainer.
Yep.
They work a lot with the UCI and we work very closely with them. And yeah, when you really get down to the, how it wets out the metal, what the metal, the surface roughness is, what, that affects how we create the additives. I mean, totally tickles all the like super nerdy parts of my brain. But yeah, when you get down to it, I mean, roller chains are insanely efficient, which is why they've worked on bicycles forever. But the level that we're able to take them to now, I mean, we see on the track, we're seeing near 99% efficiency with waxed, properly treated, kind of polished, like all, pulling out all the stops. You can get pretty close to 99. But, in a top end drivetrain, we're in the high 97s. That's crazy efficient.
So why are we not seeing more companies follow this trend, or even more bike pro teams use it? Are they nervous about it? Is it expense? What is it?
So if there's a downside, it's that it's different, and that you do have to take the chain. Well, to hot wax, the better of the wax technologies, you have to take the chain off the bike. I would say, and certainly from the teams that we're working with, I mean, I don't think there was a stage one at the tour this year on not a wax chain. I mean, every chain, like pretty much every Olympic medal has been won on a wax chain. And not saying that all of it was mine. I mean, mine or somebody else's. It's absolutely the state of the art of the technology right now. And, there's definitely teams out there who, don't have the sponsor to can provide the product, don't have the money to buy from someone like us. But, I think we have 5 customer world tour teams right now, who are taking some sponsors' money and then buying wax chains from us. And I know that they're doing that from the other, Ceramic Speed is absolutely selling to teams that they don't sponsor, because I see their chains on bikes.
So they buy their chains fully waxed and then just change their chains over or re-wax
Yeah, they
them?
just use them. And I think for most teams, you're using them on critical days, right? So, a lot of the teams we work with will sell, 100, 200 chains a year. You're clearly that you're not using 200 chains for the entire season. But they do save them and pull them out for Roubaix and, the key time trials, a lot of the tour stages. You might have one rider, on wax for all the stages. We were really thrilled. We just announced, I think a week or two ago, when it finally could all be talked about, that we're coming on as the official chain lubricant of Visma, which is good. And they're super close.
Chain waxer.
Chain wax, yeah. And so we're now working to help them develop systems to wax every rider every day. And in a lot of ways, for me, it feels a lot like my vision of carbon wheels at Zipp, right? I want every rider on carbon wheels every day. And now I want every rider on a wax chain every day. And the hang up there is, the mechanics are used to doing what they've always done. And so, just like the riders, this is new. It is different and it's a little scary. And then you have very real hurdles like, well, we don't have a wax melting system on the truck. Okay.
The bus. Yeah, on the truck.
And so, a lot of it is solving those logistics problems. Where do we store it? How long does it take to heat up? How long does it take to cool down? Where do we hang the chains? How do we keep track of which chain goes with which bike? Because especially with the gearing, you might have different lengths of chain by a link or two,
So how often would they need to wax it? Is it every day or is it every week?
You get about 300 to 350K per waxing. So, I think a lot of our teams this year at the tour were, maybe every other day. And a lot of them are just taking, like, we're waxing the chain. We also do a pretty cool diamond slurry polish where it's actually ridiculous. So you take nanoscale diamond, and we've got about a probably 5 centimeter deep bed of this in a ultra powerful ultrasonic cleaner. And you sink the chain in this, it's kind of like sand, but it's diamond. And you ultrasonically run it and pump this like submicron diamond powder through the chain. And what it does is it gives you an insanely consistent surface finish in terms, you think of, lubricants don't want polished surface. They want very controlled, tiny scratches so that the lubricant and the additives in the lubricant can kind of hang onto that surface. So it's like if you're a car guy at all, when you don't polish a cylinder bore, you hone it with a stone to get a very precise kind of a scratch to it that can both bear the load but also hold the lubricant. And so we do a process where we diamond polish the chains like that, and then we wax them for the team. And for the last couple of tours, we've got, like I said, probably 5 World Tour teams that, we drive around with we pre-polish everything, wax it, and then we follow them around, and we take the chains every day and we re-wax them and then give them back to them.
Far out.
Which
is just
yeah,
insane. Like, you think about yourself, everyone's probably listening at home going, what am I even doing putting lube on my chain here now? Like, look, to bring it back to us, I guess, riding at home every day, clearly you're not re-waxing it. If you are waxing your chain, which is great, you're probably not re-waxing your chain every 300k. There is a long-term effect of waxing your chain, and you can just keep rolling on. If you had to choose between lube and wax, tell me about the long-term effects of waxing if you're just at home, because investing in it is more expensive, but actually in the long run, maybe not.
Yeah. So, we also make a drip wax. I think we're the only system. We've got a hot melt dip and a drip on emulsified wax. And the wax drip emulsion is the same stuff that's in the hot melt. So like if, you can just use the drip, or you can hot melt and then use the drip to kind of top off, as we say. And the drip on, you probably get 200 to 250K. So, you're, like for my personal, I commute to work every day on an e-bike. I hot wax that thing probably every 1,000 miles, and I drip in between because it's just easy. I think people have different systems like that, but you can also just go with drip wax. You just have to apply it more frequently than the hot melt. And, one of the dirty secrets of oil-based lubes, and we actually make the world's best, not me saying it, but Zero Friction Cycling independently tested world's best oil-based lube. Oil-based lubes have amazing longevity, but the problem with them is they hide when they're broken down, right? So you have this sort of like viscoelastic sound damping effect of oil that even when it's dirty and it's acting as a grinding paste and it's slow and it's grinding your chain, it's still quiet. And so you think it's good and you're just killing your chain. And because people all the time will say like, oh, I tried your wax, but you're synergetic. I get 1,000 miles between applications. And say, well,
so you think it's good.
I know you think you can go 1,000 between applications, but that's probably not right. And Adam at Zero Friction has a ton of really fascinating, data to take you through how this works and why. But yeah, I mean, you think now you can easily get 15 to 20,000 K on a wax chain because there's if you're waxing it consistently and taking care of it, dirt's not getting in to make the grinding paste, and the metal's never touching the metal. And so the things last forever. Well, if your chain isn't wearing out, then your cassette isn't wearing out and your chain rings are wearing out. And, my God, I mean, if you saw like the SRAM Red Axis Explorer, so many words in that thing that was just launched. I mean, a beautiful Grupo. That chain is like $200 and the cassette is, I think, $700, $680 or something US dollars. So, if you can double or triple the life expectancy of the chain and the cassette and the chain rings, that $25, $50 a lube is saving you thousands of dollars in parts, right?
And let alone pedal that bit easier, whether it's, racing your mate in the bunch or just getting to work a little bit easier. Look, I guess let's talk about very quickly, and you're probably going to struggle with this, but looking at road racing now, we've seen a big shift in tyres. And, I guess the ultimate question is now, what is the optimal? We're thinking about the World Tour, whether you're doing your local club race or, what if you can have the optimum tyre size and setup. What are we looking at now? We spoke about, back in the day, we're talking about 19s, 19 mil they were racing on. When I raced Roubaix for the first time, we went up to 23. It felt huge. Oh my God, we're riding the big tyres. I wouldn't even ride a 23 mil tyre ever now. At the end of Roubaix, I was riding a 30, which felt very big. Are the guys going to go up from there? Are they going to come back? Let's move away from Roubaix. Let's just talk about normal road racing. What are we seeing as the optimum tyre size and I guess setup these days?
Yeah, it have said for a number of years. I think where we end up ultimately is in this like 32 range. With pro racing, you are going fast enough that there's absolutely aero penalty to these wider tires. For the riding
Yep.
that I'm doing, and the not racing that we're all doing, the you can argue that there's typically a little bit of a rolling resistance benefit to the wider tire, and we're not going fast enough to really be penalized by the aero. But of course, you look at these speeds the World Tour guys are riding, absolutely. You also start to see some pretty significant weight penalties as you start getting up bigger than 32. And a lot of that is just the tire as it becomes has this larger diameter, it's presenting more of its tread and its carcass to the ground with a lower angle of tangency, essentially. And so the tread has to be quite a bit wider to prevent sidewall cutting. And so there's a sort of like nonlinear weight gain as these tires get bigger to not risk these sidewall cuts. So it's hard for me to see bigger than 32 really working in road racing with the technologies we have today. Clearly something could come and change that.
Are we seeing, because I was rolling around the Tour de France this year and I was going up to the team cars and having a look at the sidewalls, and often you get a fake number on there anyway, and there's difference in numbers between
we started that, by the way,
different tire brands. But
oh yeah,
did you?
Totally. We started that. I don't want anyone else to know what's
and
up.
also the measuring of tires is slightly different between companies too. So look, I often saw 30 or 28, but were riders riding 32s now in the World Tour?
Yeah, they're out there. Yeah, I mean, guys are riding 33, 34 at Roubaix. There are 32s out there. If you go to this Silca tire pressure calculator, we require a measured width because the different bead widths of the rims change that. I've got a set of these really cool 3T wheels that have a 29 millimeter inner bead width, and a 32 millimeter tire, 32 Conti GP5000 on there measures 35.5. And so, that bead width is so critical in what the tire actually nets out to. But yeah, there's a lot of guys running, 30s that measure 31 and a half. I mean, look at, Pogacar's, 30 mil tires on his Envy wheels because they're hookless. Those are 30s that measure 31 and a half. And honestly, he would be, for most days at the Tour this year, would have been slightly faster on a 28 that would have measured more like a 30, but it's not allowed with the new hookless standard. So, that's a thing that's in play as well. And so I think, you're going to start seeing 29 millimeter tires are going to become a thing here in a bit, because you've got a lot of companies that are trying to go hookless, but they're trying to go, keep that 25 millimeter kind of inner bead width. And that doesn't work with a 28. It does work with a 30. It will work with a 29 if somebody makes it. So those are coming. But yeah, for the rest of us, I would say, ride your 30, 32, get your pressure optimized. You're not going to be slower, on those, but you will be more comfortable. You'll reap the handling benefits. And then, in the World Tour, I think we're going to still be time trialing on 28s, maybe slightly smaller. That one of the problems now starts to become logistics. A lot of the teams, I did a tunnel test last year with a team, and we found, the 25 was actually a faster front tire than the 28, but they hadn't ordered any 25s from the sponsor. So there weren't any. And you're like, well, maybe we'll solve that next year. And you know how the logistics of that work. It's, some of these things you can kind of pull out of thin air, and some of it's like, well, we have 5,000 tires in a warehouse somewhere, and that's all we get for the year.
That's what we've got. That's right. It comes back to that sponsor thing, doesn't it? Unless you've got the budget to go out and buy tires, get them relabeled in your sponsor's tire. This is like a whole nother realm, which gets done every so often, the Roubaix or the Tour de France's. But, for the 99% of the races, you just got to sort of make do with what you've got. Yeah,
for sure.
I guess lastly, mate, it's a big question, but what is going to be the next big bike phenomenon that you sort of see? We saw disc brakes come in, tubeless tires. We're talking about waxing chains. There's a whole lot of stuff I'm looking over. Just if you could foresee and give us the tip off. What are you liking the look of? What do you sort of foresee as the next thing that's coming?
I'm hopeful, and certainly the circles I kind of travel in, I would say integration that's less painful than the integration we have today. We're really hitting an optimal point of, bikes that are super light. And, we actually have aero bikes that are comfortable, that are also pretty darn light. But the trade-off has been that they're generally impossible to work on. like, oh, you need to add a headset spacer. Good luck with that, right? Or you need to change a cable, or whatever.
I loved coming to the mechanics and joking after a stage. Could you just change my bars before tomorrow?
Right.
And they'd look at you to see if you're joking. You're like, just kidding, mate.
Yeah, and so I'm excited. That's a huge limiting factor right now, and even at the World Tour ranks, right? Hey, I need a new stem. I want to try a narrower bar. Oh shit! I mean that could be 6 hours of work for the mechanics, and so it in a weird way, we've sort of marginal gains ourselves into a spot where maybe bigger gains can't be had. Go to the wind tunnel and say, well, okay, he's on a 130 with, 40 centimeter bars. Let's put him on a 140 stem with 36 centimeter bars. Oh, well, that's 5-6 hours of work. Well, we don't have those parts. So I think smarter, better integration is going to be the next thing that's really necessary to allow the continued marginal gaining of the bike. But I'm really pleased to see. I mean, I think Trek's brought one this year. The new tarmac, you've seen it. The Cervelo stuff is great. We're definitely getting back to a spot where it won't ever be truly like one bike to rule them all. But think of in the Venn diagram, it's coming together in a way where you will have comfortable, very aero bikes that are also light, and you will be able to work on them. It's not next year, but it's, I would say 3 to 4 years out. I think I see so many people really working towards that, and very smart people that I know and talk to are now focusing on the problem. And that means that it's going to happen. That gives me a lot of hope.
Josh, I had a whole bunch of other questions here, but we can't even get to it. It's been so fun chatting to you. And look, I like breaking it down to my level as well, because you can talk at all different levels. I highly recommend a lot of people to go across and have a listen to your podcast, Marginal Gains, and go and get some stuff from Silca too, because I am going to start waxing my chains. Ever since we chatted a few months ago, that's something I want to do. Josh, thanks for coming on the pod.
So much fun, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. He is really interesting. There's so much more to unpack there. We barely even scratched the surface. He sent me out some wax. I've seen it in my inbox. It's coming. I can't wait to start waxing my chain and tapping into not only the performances when I'm out riding, but the performance of my chain, because realistically, I don't take good care of my chain after hearing what he said about those lubes. There's heaps going on. Make sure you get yourself involved in the Dirty Docker. If you live overseas, there's nothing wrong with that. Fly in, get into Melbourne Airport and drive up to Lancefield. That's easy done. What are you talking about? No barriers there. Next week, we've got a great episode. That will be the race communique with my friends Luke Durbridge and Tom Southam. Tom Southam, as we speak, is on the Vuelta a España. As we speak, I'm commentating the Vuelta a España in at SBS, so listen out for me there. Next week, we're going to unpack that with those two guys. And the week after that, we will have another episode dropping for the members in Life in the Peloton over at the Pelo. So if you're not a member and you want to hear more podcasts, make sure you go and join up, either to the Echelon or back in the Doom line, whatever you prefer. There's heaps of benefits there too. You can get yourself a signed copy of the Life in the Peloton book, all included in that membership, plus those podcasts that I'm doing with my old mate, Swain Tuft. Guys, heaps going on at Life in the Peloton. Lots more podcasts to come. Sit back and wait and enjoy. Until then, guys, take it easy. Cheers. That iconic music in this episode was composed by none other than the legend, Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.